So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the unlicensed counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode, a 2024 episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor, and as always, so grateful to be here on this beautiful, sunny, perfect, kind of cool Scottsdale, Arizona day. First off, I want to say a big thanks to Robin and Daniel, my friends that you never see here on camera in the studio, but really make this thing go and make me look as good and sound as good as humanly possible. So big thanks to you guys. I really appreciate your support in doing this. It means a lot, and it's a lot of fun to work with you. You should hear the stuff we say before the mics heat up and turn on, right? And there could be a whole other show getting around here. So, hey, I hope you had a great holiday season. Whatever you were celebrating, I don't care. I hope it was fun. I hope you got to relax. I hope you got to spend some time with your family. Hopefully you had some wonderful political discussions. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? But really, I had a great time with my family, but that's a little but with a comma afterwards. But I do have some interesting kind of follow-up that kind of came to mind after I went skiing and took my daughter skiing and saw the cousins and my brother and my parents up in Park City, Utah. Had a beautiful time, got my daughter out on skis for the first time, and it is so fun. I've been a skier my whole life to kind of see a little 4-year-old on the magic carpet there with the edgy wedgie connecting the skis and getting the French fry and the pizza going. It's just a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun, a lot of family time. But like I said, with that family time kind of came some lessons that popped into my mind. In fact, that I even had a counseling session yesterday where I discussed some of these things. So again, the unlicensed counselor doesn't just sit here and spew out information over the airways. I'm an active participant in the counseling world as well, too. I don't have it all figured out, but I do think I have a couple things that are worth passing on to everybody. So before we get too deep into the episode, because I am fired up in this new year and ready to go, I want to take a quick moment and say thank you to our friends at ShareTech. Look, you've heard me talk about ShareTech. You know the importance of drug and alcohol screening. There really is only one test that you should be using if you are doing at-home drug and alcohol screening. ShareTech detects the most substances of any drug test possible, period, end of stories. Not only does it detect the most substances, and that includes alcohol as well too, it will tell you the levels of said drug or alcohol within that person's system as well too. And that's a really important part of monitoring someone who may be in early recovery or who may be trying to, stay sober in any way, shape, or form. So knowing the levels is important. And also there are built-in ways that this test can be detected if someone's trying to cheat. I've said it before. They use a very unique patented process using a DNA cheek swab and then DNA cells that are extracted from the urine where they match and make sure that person who provided the sample is the one that actually, is the same person because they match at the cheek. So really, really cool stuff. Then you get a report sent directly over to you. It is the industry leader for at-home drug and alcohol screening. ShareTek. You can't go wrong if you need an drug or alcohol screen. Visit our friends at ShareTek. Big thanks to them. And as always, want to talk about some of the cool stuff we're doing at the StopStartsHere.org. This is the nonprofit that is solely focused on youth drug prevention. We are a social media focused company using all kind of edgy, bold, raw, intriguing content. We've got just some new content that's put out there from a mother who unfortunately lost her son due to a fentanyl poisoning. And it is really compelling, hard-hitting stuff. It's terribly sad, candidly, and makes me cry every time I watch it. But go to the StopStartsHere.org, follow us, donate. We're going to be doing a lot more. If you've got ideas or have any thoughts around it, please shoot me a message. We'll be happy to kind of include that as we roll out some more content as well, too. So, okay, cool stuff. Holidays, family, fun, system, family communication dynamics. Here's some interesting things that kind of came to light as I was talking and spending time with my family. I mean, look, one thing that I've learned over the years that I think most families are doing the best that they can, right? So I like to give people a little bit of credit. Is it perfect? No. Is it dicey? Yes. Do we get frustrated and all these types of things? But I do think it's important to step back, and we discussed this in my counseling session. We've done it a couple times of like, look, you got to understand that people are always kind of doing the best that they can. And what I think counseling can bring to the table is an approach where hopefully we continue to improve on how they were doing things, how we communicating, maybe breaking old patterns of communication that have led to frustrations on both sides. So today I wanted to dig into, one of the things that I found is, when I'm calling it send and receive, right? So how a message is sent versus how that message is received. So when I'm saying something to my parents versus what they are hearing, and then when my parents are saying something to me and what I'm hearing. And I'm just using our kind of dynamic as an example. This could be husband and wife. This could be to your kids. It could be your brother. It could be your boss, whatever that is. But the intent is really kind of the original purpose or meaning behind a statement or message. And the receiving side is really how that message is interpreted by others. And honestly, you could just call this misunderstandings, right? But they arise when that intent can get twisted during the communication, especially when a statement can be kind of recycled or repeated. It's in different contexts. That's when this twisting kind of occurs. So, first off, I just wanted to kind of say what intent and receiving is in terms of how I'm doing this. And again, I'm kind of calling it send and receive. But there are a lot of different ways and hows messages get twisted, right? So number one would be context changes. So you have a comment in the original context that was said, and then when it gets repeated, maybe it gets twisted a little bit. Maybe the perceived meaning gets changed a little bit. So all of a sudden, when you're receiving that message, it's not exactly how it was intended to be delivered. Right. And then I've got examples of all these, and I want to roll through that really kind of highlight some of this as well, too. And I think they're examples that hopefully you've probably heard or used or experienced in your own world. But number two on kind of the tone and the twisted is the nonverbal and tone as well, too. So, your voice, this is something I have learned, I'll say the hard way over the course of this unlicensed counselor's career, because my voice can come across rather strong, right? My tone can be rather, I don't know if it's harsh or loud or bold or whatever it is, but when I elevate my tone a little bit, like all of a sudden it really starts to push maybe an intent that I don't intend when I'm delivering said message. So that tone, the voice, the body language, whatever it is that's accompanying that original message, when it's reset or restated and said with these, the body language, the tone, the voice, different things, that can lead to kind of this twisting. So when that person is receiving their message, they're not necessarily receiving the thing that you are trying to deliver to them. And I think that's an important one to remember on how we kind of, and in tone, I think is a big one, a part of that. And then body language is right there with it as well, too. But let's also remember number three, personal biases, right? The receiver's personal experiences, biases, and current emotions can color how they interpret that message, right? So depending on what's going on your day, right, you can be hearing that same message in a certain mood and be received one way versus maybe a different day you're in a more positive mood and that same message is delivered in the same way and you receive it in a different way. So just things to keep in mind as we have these filters that we're accepting these information and these comments through, right? And number four is right up the alley, too, of selective hearing, right? We've all been guilty of this at different points in time. People might selectively hear parts of a message that they align with when their beliefs and concerns and ignore the other parts. I think this happens a lot in the 24-hour news world, right? Like we'll just grab onto the sound bites and the bits that we want to hear that kind of align with the values or the things that we want to reinforce, right? And we kind of leave some of the rest of that stuff, out to the side. And I think that leads to a lot and they know that we're going to do that. And I think that leads to a lot of the polarization that we have between a lot of people and factions and political beliefs and all that kind of fun stuff. Number five is simplification, right? So, complex messages might be oversimplified when we repeat them. They'll lose some of the nuance. They'll lead to some generalizations, right? So again, that message when sent that one way, now if it's simplified, it may not have that same intent when it's being received by the other person as well, too. And number six, and this is one that, this is really what brought this entire topic to my mind, is just those family history and patterns of behavior that we've been ingrained in for, decades. I'm 44 years old. This probably started when I was 10 or something like it. Probably started sooner, but I think I start remembering things around that time. So, when you get into these entrenched patterns, specifically within a family system, and that, mom or dad says something and you react this way, and then your reaction leads them to this. And those things just go on over the course of decades and probably get worse, especially over the teenage years. And then a young adult, you're trying to find your ways. And now, when does a kid kind of become adult, and what does the parent and kid relationship look like? I mean, these are challenging times and things, and if not kind of thought through with some intentionality and how the communication patterns shift over time, could lead to you staying stuck in the same patterns that you were talking to your parents with when you were 16 years old. And now you're 44 years old and you're going, wait a minute, this when you say that, it immediately brings me back to that emotion. It immediately triggers this response that we've had. And then we're engaged in some kind of, competitive dialogue or banter, or kind of trapped in those same patterns. And I think it's something that you really, I've found counseling to be really beneficial to help me, in terms of working through this, because when you step back with, a third party who's not a part of those, and they're able to see, because I've gone to counseling with my parents just so we can address some of these things and go, oh, wow, look, what I said was nowhere near what you heard. And the way that you just responded is the way that I'm trying to avoid a response. So you get stuck in these things. And until someone really steps back and goes, wow, look at this. Look at how you guys are interacting. And then it's not berating us or something like that. You're just going, oh, holy cow. That's the same way that we've communicated for 30 years. And it kind of goes back to that parent-child thing when you were 16 years old, and you're still doing that. So what do you do in order to kind of move that, to get away from that, right? And I have a whole list of kind of ensuring, accurate reception of the intent. But let me go through some examples before I even do this, because these are things that I wrote down that have probably popped up in your world that I know that I have faced as well. And again, this could be parents, this could be girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, kids, right? So number one was, I need some space, right? So the intent being, I need some time alone to kind of think, right? Now, the person on the other side, again, when possibly twisted, that gets interpreted as a desire to end the relationship, right? So, think about the drastic twistedness that can have of just someone saying, I need some time alone to think. And then the other person, again, depending on what filter they're feeling, that mood that they're in, desire to end the relationship. That's a drastic miscommunication, right? That could have serious consequences. Another one that I've heard, and I've said this one plenty of times, you're always on your phone, right? You're always on your phone. So my intent is, and I don't do a good job of saying this, is I'm feeling neglected, right? I'm feeling neglected. The other person may be on the other end receiving this as, hey, you're being antisocial or you're addicted to your phone, right? So vastly different messages that are being sent out and a message that's being received there as well, right? I've said this one to my daughter. I don't say it in kind of the tone that I'll probably say it here, but this room is a mess, right? My intent is just for a desire for a little cleanliness. I'd like the room to be picked up a little bit. And what she may hear, and again, and maybe it was my older stepdaughter or stepson or something like that, the twisted thing is, you're critiquing someone or their character, right? You're putting them down, right? So again, just these little things. And now add in a little tone shift. Add in, is my furrowing my brow when I'm saying this, or am I kind of looming in the door? And all these messages and the intent that I want to get across is completely being misconstrued, right? Number 4, now as parents, we've heard this one before. I'm not hungry right now, right? So my intent is saying, I'm simply not feeling like eating, right? I'm just actually not that hungry. Again, a skewed or twisted kind of reception of that. I don't really like this meal. I don't want to eat this. I don't like it. I'm just not interested, kind of thing, right? So, and I just went through this list because I feel like these are like common ones that we've all probably bumped into that we can all go, Yeah, I probably said that, or I was the one kind of hearing the twisted message on the other side. What about number 5 on my list? I'll do it later, right? So my intent is, hey, I'm going to address this. Maybe it's a little more convenient time for me, right? And a person who may be hearing it a different way could see it as procrastination or laziness, like you're putting it off, right? Like you don't want to deal with that, something like that. So again, simple little messages that we probably hear or say on both sides every single day, or at least every week, every month, right? And how a send and receive, how those wires get twisted. How about this one? Can we talk about this later? My intent is really, I need to think about this, before discussing, right? But the other person could be sitting there going, are they just avoiding me? They just don't care? They just lack interest? Like what's the deal, right? Send, receive, intent, receive, right? You did well, but, right, that but statement that's always in there, right? We all know that one. My intent is to offer some constructive criticism. And I've been on this one plenty of times. What I hear is you're focusing only on the negative part, right? You're focusing on the negative part, right? And there's room for improvement on both sides of this thing. But I think it starts by understanding and kind of stepping back and go, our wires are crossed, right? Our send and receive signals, what you're saying, I'm not hearing, right? We're not there. So how are we ever going to make any progress until we start identifying that, oh crap, we're not even speaking the same language right now, right? Number 8, I was joking, right? My intent was, look, I just joking around, lighthearted humor. And what you hear is insensitive, being sarcastic, right? Those types of things, simple enough. But we do this stuff daily, which is why I wanted to hammer this. Here's a good one. That's an interesting idea, right? My intent is, hey, I'm interested. I'm genuinely intrigued on that. A person may be on the sensitive side hearing these things going, just blowing you off, dismissed, right? Polite dismissal kind of thing, right? And how about number 10 on the list here? Well, you've changed. So my intent is, noticing that you have some personal growth or you're behaving different in a positive way. I'm saying this in a positive way or frame. And what you're hearing as criticism or nostalgia for like a past behavior that I used to do and things like that. So, these are just really simple little things, but I thought these were important to highlight because this is how easily little comments, maybe even off the cuff, can be taken. I had some examples just over my break with a family, just a few, where it was like, oh, that comment irritated me. I didn't say anything. I processed it, didn't get angry or blow up or anything. And then afterwards we discussed it, and it was like, oh, no, my intent was X, Y, and Z. And I'm sitting here going, oh, I heard an entire different thing because of the tone, the look, and things like that. So, and it's funny, like I could have let a moment like that kind of spiral into, maybe getting into argument or discussion or frustrated or kind of, whatever it is. Just because, again, family dynamic system, communications, patterns, triggers, all those things that we've built up over decades and decades that we're finally unwinding, right? And pulling apart and looking at how the language and how we say things between our family system gets broken down. And now we're really working on changing and improving that. And my goal in not only improving it with my family is then I can be able to pass those same skills down to my daughter. And she can apply those things in her future family situation and whatever that looks like, in her friendships, in her work environments. So I think it's important to do this type of work versus just say, you're 70 years old, I'm 44 years old, let's just ride this train out and see how it goes. I think we can do better. I think we should do better. And I think leading by example and putting the effort into this will only make us a better family as a whole, but then also, again, be an example for the next generations of kind of improved communications as well, too. And maybe they'll listen to this podcast as well, too, since it's going to be out there for eternity, right? Okay, so I've given some examples. I've talked about how the intent that gets twisted along the way and those send and receive, right? But how do we ensure that that message that we're trying to say gets received the way in which we want it to be received? Right? So number 1, let's make sure that we're being clear in our communication. So I mean clear and specific. Reduce any type of ambiguity so that we're very clear on these things. And I mean, be specific when you're doing this. And it dovetails directly into number 2 is check for understanding when you're being clear as well, too. And this is one of the things that was our takeaway, my personal takeaway coming out of my counseling session as well, too. After conveying the message, ask the receiver what they understood and make sure it aligns with your intent. It blows my mind. It doesn't anymore because it's been brought to my attention. But it's like when I said something and then we'll sit across the room and go, okay, tell me what you heard. And it's like, oh, that's what you heard? Like, oh, whoa, like, wow, we're not even close. No wonder we, result in these same kind of patterns that are frustrating for both of us. I'm like, no, that wasn't what I was trying to say at all. So being more clear. But for me personally, making sure that I ask, hey, do you understand what I was saying there? Was that clear? Do you have any questions? Does that make sense? Do you understand my intent there? Kind of that follow-up to make sure that it landed and was received in the way that it was intended to be delivered, right? So number 3 on my list for, again, ensuring accuracy in the reception of that message is mindful listening. So encouraging families members to listen attentively and openly without jumping to conclusions. That's a lot easier said than done. I know I'm not just going to beat up just on my family, but it's like I can see when you're working on your response and not listening. Like you've got a thought that you need to get out. And I get that. That's why I might suggest writing things down as you're kind of going so you can still listen but not lose your thought. I get that. But I can see when the wheels are spinning and not, kind of digesting, the things that may be coming. So making sure that you are listening attentively and openly, right? And you really don't want them to jump to the conclusions because that's that old pattern that we've probably been doing forever. It's like, I know what he's going to say. He's going to get angry right here and I'm going to get it. Like, try and back that off. Try and take that pause and take that breath, right? So number 4, avoid assumptions. Don't assume others know your feelings or thoughts. Express them clearly. Look, this has been something I've worked on my entire life. The mind reading thing, right? I expect you know me, you love me, you've been with me, we live together. You should know me and how I operate and how I think and how I feel on these things, right? It's just stupid. It's a stupid way to do it. I get how my brain kind of goes there because you kind of feel like you've been with someone forever and they should know these things about you. And there's a touch of that in there. But stop trying to assume that they can read your mind. Use your words, as they would say, right? I know there's a couple people in my family who are hearing that right now and smiling wherever they are driving around. There you go. That one's for you. But I do agree with it. You got to say what you're feeling, right? And say it appropriately, mindfully, and using the appropriate tone as well, too. Right? Number 5 is the feedback loop. So let's create an environment in the family where those members can comfortably provide and receive feedback on their interpretations. Look, what it's taking in my family system now is just kind of some, a third party, mediator, counselor, right? To be able to kind of say openly maybe things that we've all wanted to say or needed to say that maybe haven't been said, right? And maybe your family doesn't need a counselor. Great, good for you, better than me. But ours does for now. And it's really opening up the kind of way in which we communicate. And that feedback loop is kind of gone through a counselor and they'll push it right back. He'll push it back to me and say, okay, Steve, do you repeat back what you just heard right there? And it's an exercise. And like I always say, this stuff takes practice to kind of make sure that you're hearing those things and can be asked questions and you're interpreting / receiving that message how it's intended to be delivered, right? Number 6, emotional awareness. So be aware of your emotional state when communicating, as emotions can heavily influence how messages are delivered and received. Yeah, again, my default oftentimes, especially within a family system, is, I go right to the pattern of, being 16 years old and being told I'm grounded or something like that, and the angry side, it's just the frustrated, and it's just like I just immediately slide back into it. You can feel it, you can almost see it. They know it, I know it. They do things that feel controlling. I slide into this thing, and it's just like, boom, we're right back to that place in 1995 or whatever the heck it is, So making sure that you understand if you're angry, if you're mad, if you're sad, and how you're delivering that message, how you're receiving. Know what your emotional state is when you're either delivering that message or receiving that message, and then think, pause, understand how that may, make an impression on that message. Again, either sending or receiving. So just something to be aware, your emotional awareness in this kind of context, right? So contextual clues, right? So providing the context if a statement might be ambiguous or misunderstood. So making sure that you're kind of seeing the whole scope of everything as it's going on. Again, the goal of this is to ensure an accurate reception of the intent. So make sure you understand the context when these things are being said and received as well too. Number 8, nonverbal communication, right? We all know nonverbal communication. I don't know if we know exactly how strong it is, and it is very strong, right? So being mindful of your body language and your tone as they convey just as much as your words do, right? Just as much as your words do. And I don't think we understand that enough. If I'm just standing there scowl with my arms folded staring at you, and I could be saying it in the nicest tone, but, I'm clearly not conveying the same thing that my words are by how I am standing there looking at you, scowling over you, right? Be very aware of that. Arms crossed, eye contact, tone, all of these things, really trying to, especially if you're going into an important conversation, making sure you have an idea of what your tone, what your body language looks like as you're going into these things. Number 9, avoid oversimplifying. So be cautious not to oversimplify complex message. It can lead to a loss of the important details, right? I've seen this, sometimes when getting these conversations with my dad where it's just like, little bits and bites and these kind of, oversimplified little sound bites. And I'm like, no, let's make sure we're actually saying, the real meaty stuff that needs to be said here and not sound bites. And I'm not, beating up on anybody here, but let's say exactly what we're meaning, what we're thinking clearly, and not just trying to simplify or gloss over. I mean, you really got to dig in to some of this stuff. And I think that's important because we don't want to lose the details, because I think it's important to make sure that we're speaking about the same things. And number 10, and the last one on my list, in terms of ensuring accuracy and reception of intent, patience and openness, right? Approach these conversations, ahead of time. Having already thought about this, have some thoughts going into it that I'm going to be patient, I'm going to go slowly, I'm going to be willing to kind of see their point of view and understand, be open to listening, be actively listening. I want to ask questions, I want to clarify, and I want to react slowly, right? React slowly. And really try and think about what that could mean when they're saying it, not just how you immediately want to feel when you hear it. And if you can start to do a few of these things, I think you might be able to start clarifying, this send and receive, these transmission errors, these miscommunications that so often happen. Again, I'm speaking kind of in a family systems environment. I'm fresh off a lot of family time. It was a great time, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean there's not always room to improve. And it was really great to even have a counseling session yesterday to kind of, digest all these things. Well, this was said, I felt this, my immediate reaction was that, I didn't do that, how could I do better? How can I clarify? I don't think they intended to say that. And so that's where this really kind of came from today. And I thought, let's just get out there and let's share this with everybody else. I'm sure everybody else had some send and receive errors over the holidays, right? In my family, we're not even a bunch of boozers. So I'm sure if there's some real send and receive errors out there in the world, given some of the holidays and the parties and all that kind of good stuff. But hey, I thought this was worthwhile. I always think this stuff is worthwhile. Otherwise, I wouldn't bring it to your ears and sit in front of a microphone and talk about it. But, if you have any other thoughts, go ahead and follow me at The Unlicensed Counselor on Instagram. Find us on Facebook. Send me a message if you got other ideas or things that I missed. I'd love to hear it because I love to kind of keep these conversations going. But that's it for 2024. First one under the books. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. Until next time, thank you very much.